Welcome everyone to today's class. This is the second day for our React lessons. So for today, we'll be continuing from where we stopped. So as at our call on Monday, we talked about JavaScript and a couple of concepts in JavaScript, right? So we looked at what JavaScript is, a versatile programming language, primarily used for adding interactivity to web pages, right? It's like we understood the fact that JavaScript is what enables the application to perform actions and basically perform actions. We also talked about variables and data types and control flow, a little bit of control flow. I think we will dig deeper into control flow when we start writing React proper, right? So we talked about variables being used to store data values, right? Then we also talked about data types, the likes of primitive and non-primitive data types. Right? We talked about strings, numbers, booleans, null and undefined. We also talked about objects and arrays. We also looked at control flow, looked at for loops. Okay, I think we looked at if statements and switch case, but we didn't look at for loops. So what we're going to do for for loops, we are going to look at for loops in depth when we begin to write React proper, okay? Are we together? So just respond in the chat box. Okay, all right, thank you. So for today, we are going to continue and we are going to look at features of ES6, right? So basically ES6 is like modern JavaScript. So ES6 is a major update to JavaScript that introduces many new features, right, and improvements. It makes JavaScript more modern, readable, and powerful. So some of the features include arrow functions, the class constructors, and basically class functions, right? Life cycle hooks, right? Yeah, and a lot of other features. So we are going to be looking at those features today. We'll start from the introduction of some so let's just go right into the code. So we want to start with the introduction of var, let, and const, right? I know in our last class, we talked about these two briefly, correct? Can you hear me? All right, so we talked about these three briefly, but we did not really look into them like in depth. So basically, what's happening here? So these are like methods for declaring variables, correct? So for each of them, for var was the old or was the initial method for declaring a variable. Now, the difference between var and let and const is the fact that var was function scope. So basically, what this means is that you can access var within the whole function. So as far as this var is declared within the function, it can be accessed anywhere. No matter where you're writing a block of code, you can always access this var. Now for let and const, let and const are block scoped, right? Okay, yes, you want me to increase the screen size. Okay, I can do that. How about now? Is that okay? Rahim, is that good?
Yeah, but if it can go more than this.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's try again. I think we should be able to. How about now?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, okay, you can mute. All right, so what we have here, like I was saying, acknowledge we are together with this function scope and block scope. Are we together, or should I go further with the explanation of what this means? I need response together. Okay, all right. So we are together, good. So for those who are shy to acknowledge that they are not with us or don't understand what I just explained, I'll just go a step further and give you a little analogy so that we are fully grounded, right? So basically, you should look at var, declaring a var like a scenario where you lock your door in a hallway that everybody has access to and then leave the key on your door outside, right? Now everybody has access to that key, so they can come there and access that door. They can come there and use that key to do anything they want to do. Why? Because the key is outside. It is accessible to everybody. Now, the let scenario is when you lock that key inside, right? So now you are inside the room. The key is inside the room with you. Basically, it's only you inside the room that can use that key. The people around you, the people in the hallway cannot access that particular key. I don't know if that makes it a little bit clearer. So is that clear, Adelani? I understand you just came in. All right, good. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like, right? So let's assume that we're working with these variables that we've declared. So we have x, y, and we have const z, right? So let's create a function and call it demo, all right? So for this function now, we want to say if true, then we want to bring in all these var into this application. Hold on my mouse. So we want to bring this inside here, all right? So one thing I wanted to notice is the fact that these declarations that we've made here did not affect what is happening inside this function, if you notice. Now, let's assume that I declare x outside here again. We should get a warning. Okay, actually, we won't because we can redeclare x. We can redeclare with var. So let's use const x. I think my VS Code is giving me an issue. So if we console this now, it will show an error because we cannot redeclare this. Okay, I see the issue. Good, so, right. So let's assume that we want to redeclare this const z outside here, all right? You see that it throws an error. Now this error is saying something. I want somebody to explain what this error means. One person.
Means it cannot be redefined
Okay, so this
since
how
it
we're,
isn't const.
hold on. So this is how we're going to do it. We are going to be raising hands, and then I would tell you to unmute so that we can have some level of orderliness, okay? It won't be fair if everybody unmutes at the same time. Yeah, so you were saying something. You can go ahead and unmute again. Yeah, and speak now.
I said earlier on that you cannot redeclare it since it isn't constant.
Since it is const, so why? Yes, it's const. So why is it that you cannot reassign it to const?
Is there any let that allows it to reassign a variable?
Oh,
I don't know the reason. I don't know the reason.
you don't
I
know.
just know it's a law. I just know that that has been.
Yeah, so basically it's how it was designed, right? So const is a constant, like the name implies, correct? Yeah, so Abiola, I saw your hand. Let's just move on. I think this he answered the question, but we'll just put some context to it, right? So basically, const is saying constant. It's like saying this thing is like a permanent value. It's like whatever you have declared to you have assigned to this value is like permanent, right? So you cannot reassign to this value. You cannot reassign to this particular Z, correct? So moving forward now, you need to understand that with let, you can reassign a value to let, but you cannot reassign a value to Z to const, okay? That's how it was designed. So like like I already said, it's constant for a reason, right? So for this scenario now, we cannot redeclare this Z. That is why we're having this cannot redeclare block scope variable Z in our VS Code. So that means, but if we decide to do let, right? So for let Y was 20. If we do let Y again and do, hold on, I think it's coming forward. I cannot do it. All right, good. So you cannot really declare these two, let and const. Okay. Yes, because it is block scoped. Exactly. Michelle, thank you. Yeah, so let's move on to other things. So now that we have this function defined, we want to console.log x. Okay. And then we want to console.log y, and then we want to console.log z. So what happens here now is the fact that because this is function scope, we can actually console log this x that's declared here, and we can access it from this function level. But because let is block scope and const is block scope, we will get an error if we try to console.log y or z. So let's save this and run and call this function. Yeah. All right. So when we save it and call that function, that is 87. All right, so it's fine. It's 3, 8, 4, 8, 5, 3, 8, 4, 8, 5. Okay, so this is what's happening. It is picking these values that we declared here. Okay, so let's remove those values and then good. So now we are experiencing an error in Y. Reference error, Y is not defined. Okay, but ideally Y is defined inside this block. But because it is not defined inside the function block, because if I remove this Y from here now and declare it inside here, we will be able to see the result of Y as line 78. So let's block out this. All right. It doesn't seem to display something yet for us. Function. Yeah. Hold on, guys. All right, so basically, yeah, so it's supposed to, so y is not defined. Likewise, z, if we comment z, y out, z will not be defined. The z is not defined. So basically, we should be able to access these variables if this was working a minute ago. So it should work now. Okay, so we're looking for our console.log in, hold on. All right. So 70, 84. Yeah, 84. Okay, so as you can see, we can get the results from the console.log on 84 because we have declared this variable at the function level, okay? Like it's now global, basically. So I don't know if you understand what it means to be global, if the variable is global. Just identify in the text box if you understand what it means. Okay, the Chrome console. Okay. So identify in the text box if you understand. Is that better? Okay, all right, cool. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's move on. So basically now, if we decide that we want to, let's work with an object in this case. So let's say const person, right, equals to name, right? Const person. So I think we have person declared somewhere here. All right. Okay, so we have const person, right? And we want to, we want to say person dot name, right? We want to give that name, do. So now what we are doing is we want to change the content of name to do. Now in this scenario, right? Understand one thing, we are not redeclaring this variable. Are you following? Because what we are doing now, we're using const. So the question will be, why can we change the value within the const declaration if we cannot ideally redefine or reassign value to person, right, to const? We are not reassigning any value to person, okay? We are only modifying the object of person. So basically, this person now has the object already exists. So what we are doing, we are modifying the content of that object, which is the name. So now we're saying, okay, for person, we want to modify the name and change the name to David, to Do. So let's say David. David, right? We want to change the name from person to David. So if we comment this out, okay, let's say we console.log person.name, right? It should give us the result John at this level. Now, after doing this, if we console.log the same person.name, right? It should give us David. So let's see the result first. So we have John. Then let's console.log person.name now. And then this should give us David. So you see that John is still there when we initiate this whole process. You see that this console.log still shows the person.name as John, because this happens before this modification. So it is only after this modification that you can now access person.name and get the value of David, because it is after this point that you did the modification. So before this modification, the result of person.name is always going to be John. But after doing this modification, the result can now be person.name. At the same time, you should be able to add other values to this object, right? So let's go ahead and look at other concepts. Are we together? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then Delany. Yeah. So are we together? Do we understand? Okay. So remember, we are not redefining, we are not reassigning any value to this const here. What we are doing here is modifying the value of the object. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at template literals. So why we are looking at template literals is because inside React React is understood to be a library that encourages simplicity. Okay, so yeah, exactly. So it encourages simplicity. So these are things that will help you write shorter code or write less messy code. So template literals make string constructions easier and cleaner, especially with embedded variables and multi-line strings. Okay, so I'll show you what embedded variables would look like. You understand? Anybody left behind? So I don't know if I need to take that again. So template literals basically are backticks, right? Backticks. They look like this quotes, but they are basically not the same. This is backticks. So what backticks does is it helps with that string construction. So you don't necessarily, so there was a time when you want to add two values together. Let's say you want to add let's p equals to string group, right? Hold on, what's happening? String. All right, are we together? So let's say string group, and then we want to say let's q group name. Okay, so in this scenario now, let's assume that I want to console log. We want to console log these two. Now, if we console log if we do P plus Q, this is going to concatenate them, right? Yeah, so if you use just P plus Q, it's going to concatenate group and group name. And the result you're going to get is group and group name joined together like this. Now, what we used to do so that we can have space before is add this quote, right? With a space in it. So we have a quote and then we add space in it. So that way, when this result comes out, this space serves as the space between group and group name, preventing it from concatenating, right? Now, this is quite messy. But if, assuming we want to use template literals now, right, we can just easily write console.log and then, so for us to reference these variables, we have to add the $ with curly braces, right? And then insert our variable in it. Now, with this, just adding a space, you see, just adding a space handles the whole process of plus adding the quotes plus the space inside plus again before adding this. So this solves the whole problem that we faced in these two scenarios. Are we together? All right. So what happens now is that, yes. So with this now, if we do something like this, right? The result of that will keep group up and bring group down. So you notice that assuming we're using just the normal quotes, right? If we bring one down, like we bring it down to the next line, correct? It is not going to give us this result. It is still going to give us group and group name. But what template literal does, it also helps with multi-line strings. So let's assume that you are writing a string and you are trying to see how you can have these strings in multi-line. So without having to add this is when we are doing React, without having to add the break tag, right? So you don't want to add the break tag. You just simply use template literal, and it's easy to just break your code by just entering and bringing it down to the next line, and it immediately implements the code. Are we together? Are we together, everyone? I think I've been hearing from just Adelani and Michelle. Josh, are you following? Bello, let's hear from you. Okay, Rahim, yeah, good. All right, okay. So we have two Rimfatina and Rifatina. Seems like the same person using different devices. Am I correct? Timnan, respond in the chat box, please. Oh, okay, all right, okay. Okay, let's move forward and continue with what we have to do, right? So let's dig deeper. Do we still need to dig deeper into template literals? I think this is probably understood by everybody. We can move forward to other things. Okay, all right, let's move forward to other things then. Thank you. So let's look at the structuring assignment, right? I don't know, have you guys heard of the structuring? Nope. Okay. Okay, somebody has heard of destructuring. So Bello, can you unmute yourself? Just tell us what you know. Nobody's wrong, okay? Just express yourself. Tell us what you understand by destructuring.
Okay, good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Okay, I don't know how to give you the full definition, but I know that destruction is simply means like, for example, if you have an arrays of number, and instead of you calling each number one by one or each index one by one, you can create a destruction by putting a variable inside equals to the array. So the first variable that you put inside the box, the special box, we pick the first aspect of what array. I think that is what I know about it.
Okay, okay. That's actually a very brilliant response. Thank you for that. Yeah, Emmanuel, you can go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So the structuring in JavaScript is like the way you unpack your values, you extract your values from an array or an object, then you now reassign them to variables in a cleaner way.
All right.
So
yeah,
that is
so two of you were actually quite spot on, even though Emmanuel was a little bit should I say, use terms that were a little bit more explanatory of the concept. So yes, basically destructuring is extracting values per se, just removing values from an array or an object and making your work a little bit more clean. You get, and also adding some efficiency to your work. So you can look at the structuring like sorting your mail into different slots, right? So I know that the new upgrade with iOS emails, you can see different tags at the top there that are telling you this is work email, these are banking emails, So it's like a way of sorting like pulling out those values from your array and just having them represent themselves, right? Let's see how we can make that understandable for you by writing it out. So let's say const options, right? Is equals to curly braces. This is an object, right? So we want to use, let's work with an object for now. So say URL of API. Now, this thing I'm writing here is just an example, okay? Then I now say method, and I define the method as a get, right? Then I want the secure, and I define secure as true. Okay, so what happens here now? What's going on here, right? I've created an option with an object that has key value, that has a key and a value, right? Now, these values, what we call these values, they are like defaults. These default values. So we can actually reassign these values like we saw when we were doing when we were working here, right? With const and the object. So let's assume that we want to destructure this, or let's destructure this. So I'll say const. So watch the extraction now. I'm now extracting number one, the URL. I'll also extract the method, and then I will extract secure. Right? So where am I extracting it from? I'm extracting it from options array. Does that make sense to anyone? Are we together? Now, when I want to, let's assume that I now want to visualize the content of these destructured values, right? of the structured variables, right? I would say if I do console.log for each of them, they are going to give me the values that are contained in those particular, like the actual content of those values. So this URL that I've destructured here is going to give me API, which is this. Likewise, the method will give me get, and secure will give me. So this is like a very easy way of extracting them into single variables so that it's easy for me to just pick a variable here and work with. And ideally, I'm still working from this initial options object. Are we together? All right. So let's move on. Let's see a little bit with an array, right? So let's also do const and then we'll define the array. So I want to skip when I say second. And for second, I want to say none. Okay. Then I want to say first. Okay, so who can tell me what's happening here? Anybody?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, for the second, it chose
Yeah.
not because we have already assigned none to the second. But the
Okay.
first one that is common, assuming there is a value there, it's supposed to take first. The reason why second is not taking the first is because we only have in the right answer, we only have one value there, which is first. While in the right answer, we have two parts, which is that divided by comma. So
Yeah.
the first part is supposed to take the first, while the second is not supposed to take anything, but because you have already assigned it to a none, so it
A
took the none.
default value. Yes. So you remember I talked about default now over here, adding this default value. So ideally, these whole things, they can actually be like I said, you can dynamically add these values, right? When you are trying to do your destructuring, correct? So let's assume that we are destructuring method, right? We can actually destructure method and assign a value to method. Do you get? So what happens here is that we have first value, but we don't have second value here in this array that we are trying to destructure from. So in essence, what we did is we destructured and declared a second value. And for this second value, we assigned a default content to it. Cool. Everybody with us? No, sir. Okay, so Boluwatife, please unmute yourself and let me know where you have an issue so that we can yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Sorry, I understand the destructuring of the object, but please, sir, can you just take it again from this array where you give it a default
Okay,
value?
so yes, so like I said, destructuring is the same thing. What you understand in this concept when we're working with array is pretty much right? So what you understand with this array concepts that we worked on is pretty much the same thing with what's happening here. Do you understand? So in essence, what we are doing is that we are destructuring something that doesn't exist. But for us to make sure that that thing does not is not null or undefined, right? We now added a default value to this second. Now, what happens here is that let's assume that we had first, and then we had second, right? Are we together?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good. So now, what this means is that we have first and we have second now. So if I do second, right? And I console.log should give us second. Okay? Are you following? Because this is what we are now displaying, this second. But what happened with the initial implementation was that we did not have any second value in our array per se. But that didn't stop us from doing a destructure and then assigning a value to that second one. Do you understand now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I understand. Thank you, sir.
All right. So if we come here now, we can always still pick the first. We can still destructure the first. And when we console.log the first, it should also give us first. Correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good. So yeah. All right. So we can move on. Thank you. Please, text box, can we move on? All right, cool. So let's look at spread and rest. Who has heard of spread and who has also heard of rest? Anybody? Okay. So Boluwatife, let's hear from you. How will you explain rest to somebody or spread?
Okay, sir. So, to my own understanding, the spread is used to like join separate arrays. So, if you have separate arrays like array one and array two, you can use the spread operator to join array one so that it can be like just one single array combining the first and second array.
Okay. Okay. To some extent, yes. But basically, what you use spread for is to break apart values, right? Yeah, you are ideally breaking those values apart because you want them to like seemingly stand alone so that you can add values. Now, that's the part where you explained, right? Where you are now adding to the array or object that you utilize that spread on. Are we together? Are you there? Do you follow Boluwatife?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Exactly. So let's say we have like an array. All right, let's use 1 and 2. Not necessarily need much. Then we now say const combo. So const combo here is we want to spread and create and add. So now we are spreading this value, this array, right? And then we want to add 3 and 4. So what we've been able to do in this very line of code, right? In this line of code is extend this very array. Who understands what it means to extend something? Anybody? Folabi, okay, let's hear from you quickly.
All right. Basically, in that code, what we are doing is that we are trying to unpack the values of that const array. So we are trying to tell ourselves that we want 1 and 2 to be inside the combo, array. So we're just trying to unpack the values of the array into and add some other arrays to it. So I think that's basically it.
And add other values to that very array. Yes, exactly. So what we are doing is when you look at this spread now, what you should see ideally is 1 and 2. Yes, we do like expand it. So what we are doing here is this is the same thing as what we are doing, but in this case now, because we want to work with this array, an existing array. So we want this array, when we add it to this combo, we want it to be 1 in this combo and 2 in this combo, right? So what we do is we spread the initial array, right? We spread the initial array, making sure that it takes, why we put it initially is because we want it to take the initial indexes. So let's assume that we have even 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Okay, let's just add that. So let's say we have 4, 5, 6, 7, and we want to, what happens here is that we are now spreading this, making sure that we pick each one for each array, and then we arrange it before we now add the new values that we want to add to this initial array. But now what happens is that we are no more going to be accessing this array as array, as AR, right? We're going to be accessing it as combo. Because now it is no more, it doesn't have the same values anymore. It now has new values, but the values were created using the values that were already inbuilt in array and now combined with the newly introduced 3 and 4. So if we console log, let's console log array. So we don't necessarily need to do this. So let's console log array, and then let's also console log combo, right? And then we see what it looks like. I'll give my editor overzealous. Okay, so let's see what it looks like. That's line 112. First is not defined. Okay, so yeah, we have an issue here. First. Okay, so as you can see, we have for the first console log, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But for the second console log, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus the 3 and the 4 that were introduced in the second array where we did the spread. Okay. But the difference now between spread and rest is that for rest is used to gather values into an array. Are we together? Yes. So like you can actually do this with objects too. So let's just do objects so that at least we don't get confused later on thinking, can I actually do a rest with object? Good. So as you can see, what is happening here is that we are doing the same thing here with this object. We're spreading this object and adding C to the object. So what happens now is when you console log this new object, you are going to get, okay, whose hand is up? Okay, Adelani, yeah, go ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Sir, I just want to ask about this other array where we define the initial array. So there are similar numbers like 3 and 4. Are they not supposed to like be uniform, like not supposed to repeat itself in the output? Like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, so no, not at all.
Okay,
So
but you understand?
so ideally, this is an array. You know how arrays work. Each of them could, you know that in this array, you can actually have a string inside this array. Okay? So if we save this now, that array should show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are you following?
Yeah.
So what's happening is they are all like independent values, living in their own specific index. And I believe that we should all understand what index is.
Yeah. The position.
Exactly the position. So this index 0, this index 1, they are all independent. They are not dependent on the
I get it.
let's say the orderliness of this array now. Now there are methods that you can use to make this array orderly, like sorting methods and others, right?
Yeah.
Good. But ideally now, it doesn't, as far as you've not applied any sorting method or you've not applied any method that enforces it to take a particular shape, it doesn't affect it. Okay?
Yeah, that's true. Understood.
Yeah. Okay. So, but we understand what's happening here in objects. It's about the same thing that we've done here. That has been replicated here. I just wanted you to see what it looks like with an object. So it's not strange, right? Correct? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and look at REST, right? So for REST, let's assume a function that says log all. Then for this function, we say first, then announce REST. Okay, so I want to console log, yeah, exactly. So good. So in this scenario now, right? Are we following? All right, so in this scenario, right, if I decide to console.log, if I decide to run this equation, right? This function. So running this function, it will require arguments, right? As you can see, we need to add some arguments to this function, and the function already requires multiple arguments. Now, what happens is that when this function is being run, it picks this first one as the first, and for the rest, it gathers them together. Are we together? So let's see. Okay, so let's see what it looks like in practice, right? So now we have 1, we have 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So ideally, in our console, we should have 1 displayed separately, and then we should have an array that contains 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we understand? So I need to be sure that a lot of other people understand. Please don't be shy. Just go ahead and ask and raise your hand if you don't understand. We can always look at it again quickly and move on. All right, Boluwatife. So unmute yourself. Let me know exactly what you want me to take again.
Okay, so you said that once we impute like all the values like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the function of log all. Can you hear me, sir?
Sorry, no.
Can you hear me?
Can you take that again? Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I said that once we impute all the numbers, like all the digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the log all function, I didn't get what you said concerning the first and the rest of total. Like the
Okay,
first and
so
the
yes, so from your question already, you should be able to help you understand what we're talking about. He's saying first and then the rest.
yeah.
Do you understand? Yeah, so he's saying yeah, hold on. Mute yourself, please. So it's saying the first, right, should be singled out. We don't want the first from what we are doing here. But this rest now is saying every other argument or value added to this particular function should be put together in an array. That's what this rest does. So remember that what object is doing is opening up your what spread is doing is opening up your object so that it can add values to it. Now, what this is doing is gathering a particular set of values that you have decided that you want to rest. So it's gathering it together and creating an array of those values. So that's why what happens in this console.log now, when you do first and then you do console.log rest, what happens is that it's the result of the first console.log where you are console.logging this first is 1 because that's the first value before this first comma, right? Now, when you do rest, this rest now means it is now gathering all these other values into one array. Do you understand now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. I hope every other person is clear. Nobody's left behind. Okay, so let's go back and look at default parameters, right? So remember we did a little bit of default parameters here where we had a second, where we did a destructure and then we gave it default parameter. Likewise, what we are having over here. For all these are all default parameters we are giving to these values, right? So if we come down here, let's say we want to say a function, we want to have a function for connect, right? And then for this function, we want to say host equals to local host. Are we together? And then we want to say port equals to, yeah, okay. So now what we have here now is we said port is equals to 8080, right? And then we also said host is equals to local host. What we have done here now is assign default values to these parameters. Oh, thank you. Yes, so we're assigning default values to these parameters, right? Likewise, for ports, we're assigning a default value. Now, when we come to console.log connecting to the host, which is this value, at this port, which is 8080, right? Ideally, when we run this function, the result should be connecting to localhost 8080. Now, if we come here and then we run that same function and now give it default values, like give it custom values, So now what happens is, based on this function, the expectation is that the first argument is for host and the second argument is for port. So whatever I put in the first argument, which should be a string ideally, would replace whatever default value we had given to host, right? Likewise, whatever I put at the second parameter will also replace the value of what we have in port. So if we run this particular connect again, what should happen now is we should see that connecting the result should be connecting to example.com at 3,000. So let's see that in action. So you can see. So what we have done now is simply leave a default value, or basically default value, so that if it is undefined, it can fall back and display this value, right? So as far as you don't define any of this value in this function, it will always display this. But if you define null, if it is defined as null, it will not display the default value. So it will only display the default value if it is undefined. But if it is defined as null, it will not display the default value. Do you understand? All right. Okay, so Emmanuel, what do you not understand, please? Let's hear from you.
All right. Please, can you quickly take the default value again? I'm a little bit lost.
Everything.
Yeah, just a brief summary.
Okay. So remember the concept of redeclaring. Let's assume that you're using var, right? And when you declare, let's say var, and you say name, var name, and then you give a name, you can redeclare that var and give it a different name, right? But if you console.log before where you redeclared it, we had a scenario like that here. It will always give the result of the previous one if it is under that one. But once you console.log under where you redeclared it, it should give you the new value that was declared, correct? Now, in essence, what this means here is that we are assigning this local host as a default value to this host. And then we're assigning port as a default value to port. So inside this connect ideally is expecting two parameters: host value and port value. But what happens now is, because we have given this host and port value default values, if we run this equation, if we run this function without adding those values, it will still run. But now when it runs now, it is this default value that we are going to be seeing on the console. But if we now explicitly declare custom values now when running this particular function, it will no longer utilize these default values that we added. It will utilize the custom value that you've given. So now let's assume that, let's do a little example. So let's remove these values and just say port, host and port, right? So if we save this, right, let's see what happens in our console. So you see undefined. Do you understand? That is for this particular run. It will show undefined, because we have not add this function is expecting an argument, that is a parameter of argument. So if we don't explicitly come here and give it these parameters, it is not going to display anything. So let's say example 1, and let's say 301. If we don't do this, right, it will always give us undefined. But if we do that now, you see that it is now giving us example1.com at 3001. So what has happened now is that we have actually given it the parameters that it requires for it to run successfully and give us a result. Now, what we did initially was to provide it with a default, so that if we don't have values to run this function with, we should still have a result that doesn't throw an error. We should still have undefined. Good. But when we now attach value, custom value to them, it will ignore these default values and display the custom value that you have added to the function. Are we good now?
Yes, please. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
boss.
All right, thank you. So let's go ahead. Yeah, so let's look at other things. So let's look at arrow functions. Let me see the time. Okay. Let's look at arrow functions briefly. So who can tell us a little bit about arrow functions? Anybody? Nobody? Just raise your hand. Quickly. Okay, Emmanuel, I see you. Do you want to speak?
Yes, I think I know something about arrow function.
All right, let's hear from you. Yeah, talk to me.
Yeah, okay. Arrow functions are just shorter ways of, is a shorter way of writing a function. It's a modern way of writing a function. You can even skip the return value. You can implicitly write the function. You can explicitly write the function. It's just like having, you have your const this time around, then you have your parameters, then you have an equals to, then an arrow, then you have your curly braces rather. So it's just a way that it helps to write our functions more simple. So I think that is just basically.
All right, thank you for that response. Adilani, let's hear from you quickly before we move on. I think I've not heard from Abiola in a while. So,
Yeah,
okay,
my colleague has said most of the thing, but
okay.
I just wanted to add that is often used during event handling, and also is also used to write shorter functions
Okay, all right. Let's also hear from
instead
one more.
of return.
Yeah, I get you. Let's also hear from Abiola. Rahim, you are eager to speak to. Let's hear from Abiola first.
Yeah. Okay, and you can also use it to write anonymous functions, function that doesn't have a name. Like you don't want to include any name, so you can also use it to write it.
Okay. Abiola, are you there? Let's hear from you quickly.
Okay, I was the one who spoke just now.
Oh, okay, that was not, it's not you. I wanted to call again. Forgive.
Okay.
I think it was, I think it was Rahim. Rahim, yes. Rahim, you still want to add something?
Just a little addition that is the difference between the traditional way of writing function is just to replace the function keyword with
Okay.
arrow and equal sign. So that
Okay.
makes it different from the traditional way of writing declaring functions. That's what I
Okay.
want.
All right, so I was thinking this class, we have girls, we have females in this class now. What are we doing about gender equality? I can't hear no responses coming from the ladies. I need to hear from a lady. Who is laughing there? I need to hear from a lady, please. Udo, somebody, please speak. Michelle, you were very active in our last class. I'm surprised you are.
Okay. If your function has multiple, if an arrow function has multiple parameters, you can actually use curly braces for it. But if it's just if it's not a block of code, you can just write it in a single line.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that curly brace is only when it has multiple parameters.
Okay,
Correct?
you're asking me.
Yes.
Yes, as in if it's like a block of code, you can use curly braces. But if it's just something you can write in a line, you do without the curly braces. Arrow functions allow that.
All right. Okay. I think I want to hear from one more lady before we continue. Either Michelle or Bethlehem.
Good afternoon, sir. I think arrow functions, you can use them when you don't want to assign the name to the function. So you can use an arrow function. It will be quicker that way.
Okay. Yeah, I feel better now. I've heard from everybody. I've heard from both genders. So let's continue. I think that was like just a little icebreaker. Yeah, Michelle, I see your text. All right, well done. Yeah, thank you. All right, let's go on. Somebody is even helping with some other content in the text box. So yeah, feel free to share your thoughts in the text box. Don't be too straightforward with me. Write what you feel, what you think, Others can also learn from you. I too can learn from you. All right, thank you. Let's carry on with that. So basically, you guys are not wrong. I think nobody was wrong with any suggestions they had about arrow functions, right? So arrow functions basically are like concise syntax for writing functions, right? They lexically bind the this. So behavior is more predictable, especially in callbacks, right? So let's look at it like using shorthand emojis instead of typing full expressions. Okay, yeah, exactly, GBK. So basically, arrow function is like using shorthand. Let's say you're using an emoji to show an expression instead of writing out your expression in a full sentence, right? So let's say you are sad. You can just send an emoji that I'm sad instead of writing the full text that I'm sad, right? So that's like basically why we have arrow functions, right? Or why arrow functions were created. Now, this is what we would have for a typical function, right? So let's say typical function, let's say square equals to, we'll say function, and then we want to pass a parameter of x, right? And then curly braces, right? So hold on. So yeah, so basically what we have here now is squares. So squares is a function. This is a function that is supposed to run this equation based on the value that is being added here, correct? So if we do square and put 5, right? It should be 5 times 5, okay? So this function now works. It doesn't look that long. It's also simple, right? But we can also write this same function as So let's just reuse that block of code. I don't know if you need this block of code, but I want to reuse it. So I don't want to utilize the return anymore. I just want to show you what, but let's write it differently. So const square arrow. So I'm using arrow because I want us to understand that it's an arrow function, right? So if I say equals to same x, and then I do equal sign, now I can just simply say x times x. So these two functions would give us the same results, but which one is shorter and simpler to understand? The second one, yes, the arrow function, exactly. So basically, from this, you can already see the benefits of the arrow function without even going too deep into writing too many functions, right? Now, when we now write, let's say we want to write an arrow function that has multiple parameters, right? So we cannot say return A plus B, right? So now what happens is that when we remember that what we're doing here, remember what we're doing with this function, right? When we had these parameters that we're passing to the function, correct? So same thing happens here now. So what we're doing is we're now running this function and then adding two parameters that's supposed to represent A and B. So this 5 here should represent A and 10 should represent B. So what happens is that when the return statement here gives us the result 15, since we are going to be adding 5 to 10, which is A plus B. I think that's quite simplified enough. Do I need to do anything? Okay, I should come again. All right. What do you not understand? Let's start from there.
From the beginning of this one, this second part I just have it's custom, yeah. I want to just take it again just for a refresher.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so what's happening here, right? Is exactly, you understand what's happening here, correct?
Yes, I do.
So what's happening here is exactly the same thing that's happening here. The only difference now is that we are no more passing only one parameter. We're now passing two, right? Which is why we have enclosed them in a parenthesis, right?
Yes.
Good. So now when we have two like this, we need to have curly braces so that we can have a return statement here to perform the action that we want to take on the two of them. So in essence, we're saying that,
No, continue, sir.
in essence, we're saying that this sum, right? When running this sum, you must pass. Now remember that there's no default value to this A and B. So if you're running this sum, you can't run this sum empty. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Because it expects, like as you can see, it expects A and B. It expects this too. So now what happens is you need to add values for A and B. So that's why we added A, 5 to represent A and 10 to represent
B.
good.
Okay.
What happens now is when we run this function,
In the
we
console.
get a result of 15 because we are adding A and B in this function.
Yes, understood, sir. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I hope every other person is good. Okay. Chidel, yeah, go ahead. Please speak.
I asked a question in the group chat. Is it a must that a function must have that return keyword?
Okay, so like you can see over here, the function does not have return keyword here. So it just depends on the function you're writing. But you can actually utilize return keyword for all the functions that you write. If this is what you need to understand, everybody would have, like, if I show you all your submissions, right, for the intermediate tags, you will see clearly that everybody has a pattern of writing their code, correct? Nobody's pattern is the same. My pattern will not be the same with yours because we don't have the same thought process when we are writing code. Okay, so I have my own thought process, you have your own thought process. Think basically that question is more of a perspective question. The answer to that question is more of perspective based, right? But ideally for less complex functions like something like this, you don't necessarily need to use a return keyword. Doesn't mean that you can't use a return keyword. Are we together? Do you understand?
Okay.
Yeah, so it boils down to how you want to structure your code. What are you trying to achieve with your code? What do you want to do with that function? Will it require some if statements? If it does require some if statements, how do you want to return the final result of, you now think, okay, I require a return statement to do this. So there are a lot of these are like surface scenarios for all these concepts that we're handling, right? Now, in practice, most of your functions will not be this simple in nature, right? So just bear that in mind. So when we start writing React, a lot of things we'll be doing in React would require writing. In fact, everything you require to write functions. You want to write functions. You want to handle control block within your use effects. You want a lot of things, but let's not derail. Okay, let's focus on getting the rudiments in, and then we can move forward. Someone's hand is up. Biola, please go ahead, speak.
Okay. Good day, sir. Something just came to my head now. I'm just trying to, I don't know. Yeah, can we use other, what they call it? Instead of const, can we use other, is it let of var for this function, this arrow function,
Well, like
or
I
for
said,
functions?
yeah.
Oh,
So this is why, of course, you can. But this is why we use const, right? Now, when you are defining a function, ideally, you don't want to, the expectation is that you don't want to mutate that very function that you are creating. So let's assume that you have a very large code base and you have a code base of maybe, or let's say you have a file that you are writing code and you're already writing almost 1,000 lines of code in that file. You don't want the situation where you start having errors because you mistakenly declared and the same function name, you declared that same function name again, and it doesn't throw an error because you're using var. That's going to cause a lot of problems for you. Even when it comes to debugging, you are going to go through a lot of stress with regards to debugging. But using const enforces, right? It makes sure that you cannot declare that very variable again, that very name again, anywhere in that particular file. Do you understand?
thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope you're sure you're clear. If other person understands this,
Yes, very clear.
yeah, that was a very valuable question. Yeah, so let's go on. Yeah, I see the good work you are doing, Adelani. Thank you. All right, so let's look at let's see, do we still have enough time to look? Okay, we do have some time to look at class functions. All right, let's go ahead and look at class functions. So who understands or has utilized class functions? Class is quiet. Nobody?
So do you mean class?
Yeah, class functions. Like utilizing class. So there's functional programming and there's class-based programming where you, yes, okay, so let's hear from Boluwatife. He thinks he has an idea.
Okay, so hold on, sir. I think that when you mean class, I mean that I feel that that function has to be part of the properties of an object.
Okay.
So when listing an object, the object can have like properties of a number, a string, and then a function inside the class. So I think it's called a method. So is that what you mean by class-based function?
Yes. So
Okay.
basically, yeah. So basically, what classes and inheritance does, right, makes object-oriented programming easier with a clear class syntax. Now, when we're talking about, who understands, I hope you all understand what we are talking about when we say syntax. Syntax is just like the language you're using to write the code. Like writing the code the way it should be written, like there's a process to it, there's a structure to it, you follow that structure. That's the syntax, right? So it's just like saying, I can say the syntax for English is for a sentence in English, right? But in this case now we say syntax for writing a function in JavaScript. So this is like the syntax for a simple functional a simple function. Let's say simple function. So now there are different types of programming, right? There's functional components. Let's say let's look at it from the scope of React. So within React, there's functional components and there are class-based components, right? Now, for functional components, they utilize the arrow function method of declaring these components, right? So what you're doing in a functional component is like you're writing a simple function. So the whole component is just a simple function, right? But it also returns a JSX XML. It returns an XML, HTML content. So it's like you're combining JavaScript and HTML inside one file. Instead of having JavaScript externally and then picking, referencing the IDs or the class to do your actions. Now you get to write your JavaScript inside the same file where you're writing your HTML, right? So the difference between those two now is that for functions do not necessarily require construction, right? So let me just use class functions to a little explain this thing further to avoid any form of confusion. So look at a class function. When looking at a class function, think of a cookie cutter, right? That cookie cutter is like the class. And then you're now looking at the cookies itself. Those cookies now, they are like the objects made from that class. Are we together? Okay, so let's just see it in practice so that it will be a little bit more. Let's say class, right? And they will say employee. employee, right? So for this class, right, we want to first of all declare a private field and call it salary. Okay. And then we want to go ahead and create the employee object. Just hold on, don't worry. I will explain further. Good. So now, what happens in this? What's happening in this block now? We are declaring a class called employee, right? What happens here is that we have a private field. This private field is accessible only by this employee class. Now, for an employee object to be created, we must use a constructor to construct that employee's object. Now, constructor is a special method that is automatically added when a new object is created from the class. Are we following? Because we need to understand each of them before we can understand the next. All right, good. So now, within this constructor now, you can see that this constructor is like a function of its own, right? Simple function, as you can see. It has name, age, and salary as parameters, right? Now we are accessing this name, age, and salary using the this keyword. Now this keyword refers to the object being created. That is, the object is the employee. We are creating the employee. So this is supposed to represent that employee. So it's saying employee.name, right? Employee.age, employee.salary. But in essence, what we are doing is we are accessing that employee object using the this keyword. Are we together? Now, after assessing that employee and initiating or creating, we are now initializing this salary, age, and name, right? From the this keyword. So we are saying inside this employee, we want to assign name, and then we now give it name. We want to assign age, and we assign age, and we want to assign salary, and we assign salary. Remember that this salary is a private field in this employee object. Should we take that again, or should I move on? Can we move on? Okay, we come again. All right, cool. So remember that this is a class. We have defined a class employee, right? And now, ideally, when we define a class employee, that means we want to create an employee, right? So yes, we'll get to that. Don't worry about private field. So when we create an employee now, right, we are ideally creating an object using this employee now is the cutter. Remember, this employee is a class, is like the creator of the employee. The employee is like what this class employee, the object is what this class employee is going to create, right? Now, for us to create that object inside employee class, we require constructor. Now, this constructor is taking in, we are passing 3 parameters into this constructor, which is the name, the age, and the salary. Now, within the constructor, we want to access that object using the keyword this. Now, this keyword represents that employee that we just created. That employee that we just created is an object, right? Good. So we are using this keyword now to reference that employee that we just created. Now, for that particular employee object, there are different, so this is what that object should look like, right? Hold on. So you see this object now. Let's assume that inside the object now, this is the name of the employee, the age, and the salary. Do you understand? So this is what we are creating when we do what we are doing here. Yes, exactly. So the this keyword represents the employee object. So it represents that instance, this instance of the employee object. Yeah, Excel, go ahead. You can speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
My question is, since I'm trying to use my knowledge from object, the this name, the name immediately after the this, is that the key? Because the
Yes,
name,
good. So I like the fact that you asked a question because you helped us. It will help others also understand better. So this name is the key. Do you understand? And then you are now assigning the value of name from these parameters. Remember that these parameters, they don't exist at the moment because they are those parameters. It is when we are using this, when we are now utilizing this particular class, that is when we will pass in the values of these parameters. Now, when we pass in the values of these parameters, it will now be name equals to that value, age equals to that value, salary equals to that value. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. So are we good? Can we move forward? I need responses. All right, I like the yes. Okay, let's go on. So what we are going to do now is create a method, right, inside this class. So we want to do work, right? Okay. So this is a method. This is a method that we are creating. Signature declarations can only be used in TypeScript files. We're not done. Relax. Okay. Yeah, so for this now, we want to say console.log this.name is working, right? And ends, okay, let's just keep it simple. All right. So we want to say console.log this.name is working. Remember, this is a method, okay? Now, this very method can be declared on any employee object because what we have done here is like setting ground rules for what an employee object looks like, right? So if we create an employee, ideally, we should be able to utilize this method on that employee. So we should be able to access the this keyword, this, which is the particular instance of the employee, and then we should be able to see that very employee's name. Now, let's move on. So now if I do EMP, right? So if I do const EMP now, right? So now we have EMP as a new employee. Are we following what's going on here? If you notice now, we now have a real employee. We are now creating an actual employee from this class, right? Now, with this employee, if we say employee, we now say equals to new. Now, if you look at the suggestions that we are getting here in this pop-up, right? You see that we have a constructor of employee that already tells us, okay, for this employee, you need to pass a parameter of name, a parameter of age, and a parameter of salary for you to properly create that employee object. Now, we have created a new employee called John, right? John's age is 30. John's salary is 50,000. Are we together? Now, if I do employee.work, this employee.work now, I am trying to access this method that was created here. Okay. So what happens is that when I trigger this method that was implemented inside the employee class, it is going to return this result, which is what we want to console, what we want to put to our console. So it is going to give us the name of EMP, that is the name of this employee, John, and then I'll say John is working. Yes, please. Excel, go ahead. Omit.
My question is, that line 153, you were calling the method work. Is there any place where you declared where you created the method or created the function?
Yes, that is yes. So this is me creating this method. Do you understand? And the function that the activity I want this method to perform is this console. This is what I want to see whenever I trigger this particular method. Are you following? Please unmute yourself. I want to be sure you understand.
Okay, just the network is breaking.
So yes, so I created this method. I can create another method. Huh? Hello? Can everyone hear me?
Sir.
Do you understand now in Excel?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, cool. So what happens now, as you can see here, you will notice that this employee has done a lot of things to this EMP. If you notice, because now inside this EMP, we have created an employee, 1. Number 2, we have a method that is also attached to this employee object. That method now, we can access that method inside this class to get the result John is working. So to get the behavior of that method that we declared inside the class function. So if we do this, we should get on line 159. Okay. 154. All right, undefined. Should not be issue. Okay. Thank you for that. Needs to be commented out. No, you sure? Hold on. 154, John. Okay, good. So yes, so what's happening is that it is not going to display in the console on 159. I was looking for it on 159. So it is 154, which is where we have the console.log that it displays. Adelani, thank you for that. But yeah, so we don't need to comment it out. That is where we need to see, that's where the results will be displayed. So it's 154 that will display our results. So that is John is working, right? Yeah, go ahead, please. Unmute. Excel.
Okay, what I was asking, that line 53, what I was trying to get at is that normally when you are creating a function, you usually have function, use the R function. But here there was no function. The keyword function was not written before the work.
Yes, because you're not creating a function.
I think that was what was throwing me off.
Yeah, so what happens there is you're not creating a function, you're creating.
It's like method is a form of.
Yeah, it's not ideally the same thing. So a method is different from a function. You are creating a method. It's like extending. You're extending your employee object, like giving it other functionalities. Do you get?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, exactly. One thing you can do after this call to help you further understand how this works, you can always do some further research, okay? So that we don't keep everybody. We are pretty much behind schedule. We're like 5 minutes to the end of this class. And I'm not even sure we can complete what we are doing. Okay, I think this is pretty much good enough for class. We can do subclasses later and then conclude on it and move into React. Okay, so basically this is like a simple class function. Yeah, a simple class. So you have your method, you have your constructor, you have the this keyword. So when we come back next week, we'll be able to see what super does, right? So you have super, and then you have some other things that would interest us, right? That will also help us later. But ideally, why we are doing classes is because we need to understand everything when it comes to rudimentary knowledge. But ideally, or basically, within React, you will be using more of functional programming in React. So you'll be writing more of arrow functions than classes, right? But it's good to know everything and understand everything before diving in. Are we together? Yes. Okay. All right. So do we understand so far what we've done? I think we've covered pretty much a lot of things today. Do we understand? Are we together? All right. All right. Excellent. So that will bring us to the end of our class today. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a great rest of your day.